Hi everyone, welcome to Emma, a true infidelity story. I'm excited to share a new story with you. My husband had just left town on a long business trip, leaving me to the house and our cute dog Duke. Everything at first seemed normal. I liked the quiet, could watch whatever late-night TV program I wanted and eat whatever I wanted. It was almost peaceful until Duke started acting strange. I had seen him on the first night when he sat in the kitchen, staring at a corner near the refrigerator. His ears were up and his tail totally. Still the first time that happened, well, I did not think too much of it. Maybe seeing a shadow or smelling something peculiar. Then he growled a low, deep growl. It was then that the hair on my arms stood up. I walked over trying to see what caught his attention. "Duke, what is it?" I whispered, feeling a little silly. Even to ask, of course, he didn't answer. He just kept staring, his eyes fixed on that empty space. I turned the light on and scanned the area. Nothing was there. The fridge, the cabinets, the tiled floor were exactly the way they ought to be. "Come on, Duke, let's go." I pulled on his collar, gently trying to coax him into following, but he just refused. A bit unnerved, but shaking the feeling off, I whispered under my breath, "It's just a bug or something." And then again it did the following night. This time I was lying in bed when I heard a strange noise coming from the kitchen. It was soft, like a faint scraping sound, almost like someone was shifting furniture or dragging something across the floor. My heart skipped a beat. I sat up and listened carefully. Duke was downstairs, and I could hear his low growl again. Slowly I got out of bed, grabbed my phone and tiptoed toward the stairs. "Duke," I called out quietly. No response, just more growling. When I reached the kitchen, Duke was in the exact same spot, staring at the corner like before. His fur bristled and his body was tense. The scraping noise had stopped the moment I walked in. I looked around again, my stomach tightening. "There's nothing here," I whispered to myself. But Duke didn't relax that night. I barely slept. Every little noise made me jump. Every shadow seemed darker. My mind kept racing. Was it mice a draft making something move? Or was I just being paranoid? At the third night, I began to maintain kitchen lights. Duke still stared at the same place and grew slowly. As he warned me, I tried to make it laugh and tried to tell myself that it was one of the weird cute dogs, but deep, I knew something was right. It was around midnight when I heard it, a soft, barely timing sound coming from the kitchen. First of all, I felt like I imagined things. Maybe it was just inhabited in the house, or a raising branch towards the window outside. But then I heard it again. A cool but different asterisk, click asterisk. After a slight scrap, no. I sat on the bed. My heart struck fast. Duke was down, and I could hear her less grow, the same deep warning sound he had made since days. I worked hard, grabbed my phone and slowly took myself under the stairs. When I reached down, the wind looked heavy, thick in any way. The kitchen lights were closed, but faint glow from the stratums outside the cast airy shade on the walls. My fingers trembled a little as soon as I came for the switch. Second, I reduced the light and replaced it. The noise stopped. I scanned the kitchen, refrigerator, cabinets, countertops, all accurately. But Duke was still there, frozen on the spot, staring at the same cursed place near the refrigerator. His body was hard, his tail reduced, his ear returned. "Duke, what is it?" My voice was barely a whisper. He didn't look at me, didn't even blink. I took a deep breath and stepped closer, feeling my skin prickle. I reached out and slowly opened one of the lower cabinets near where Duke was staring. Nothing, just a few pots and pans. I crouched down and looked under the fridge darkness. A nervous laugh escaped me. "You're freaking me out, buddy," I muttered, reaching to scratch behind his ears. He didn't react. His body was stiff, his muscles tense. That uneasy feeling crept back into my stomach. I turned to check the back door. Maybe it had been left unlocked, rattling slightly in the wind, but no, it was shut tight. I tested the lock, secure the windows too. Everything was as it should be. Nevertheless, I could not feel that something was closed. I ran my hand through my hair. "Okay, Duke, let's go back to bed." He finally turned to see me, but his eyes looked different, dark, more intense. It sent a shiver to my spine. I gave the kitchen a last look to the kitchen before closing the light and moving upwards. Duke hesitated before chasing me. Her gaze returned to the same place only once. That night I was barely slept. Every little crack in the house raised my heart. It seemed stretching further than each shadow. And even though I told myself that there was nothing to fear deep, I was not so sure now when my phone was buzzing. I was just going to flow. The sound bites through silence like a knife, causing me a straight shock. My heart was still unresolved, and for a second I argued whether to check it, but I liked curiosity. I reached for my phone, blinking an eye on the bright screen in the dark. A new message. Are you going to tell him everything? No name, no number, just that single sentence. A wave of cold washed over me. My fingers tightened around the phone as I reread the message. My mind racing. Tell him what. I sat up fully now, my breathing shallow. Maybe it was a prank, a wrong number. But even as I tried to convince myself of that, something felt personal. Like whoever sent it knew something I didn't want to think about. I swallowed hard and looked at the time, 3:48 am. My stomach was in knots. I gave Duke a quick glance. He was at the foot of the bed with his ears perked, and his eyes focused on the door, with his body completely tense, as if he were waiting for something. I inhaled and typed back, "Who is this?" There was no response. A strange tingling sensation crawled up my spine. I tried to shake it off and think rationally it could be spam, a glitch. But somewhere deep inside I knew it wasn't. I checked the log. No incoming calls or any missed calls, no other messages. But curiously enough, as I scrolled through my texts, I noticed something even stranger. There was no trace of the message I had just received. It was gone, completely gone. I stared at my screen in disbelief. Had I simply imagined it? Am I going mad? Duke growled low, pulling me back to the moment. My heart raced. His eyes stayed fixated upon the hallway, his body taut. I turned slowly. The bedroom door was cracked open. I thought I had remembered closing it before bed. A lump formed in my throat. I wasn't alone. I felt it. I reached for the lamp beside me and flicked it on. Warm light filled the room. But it didn't erase the shadows, clinging to the corners. Duke, my voice was barely above a whisper. He didn't move. His focus stayed on the doorway. I forced myself to stand, my legs unsteady. I stepped toward the door and pushed it open a little wider. The hallway stretched out in front of me, dark and still. I took a step forward, then another. The wooden floor was cold under my bare feet. My heart pounded against my ribs. Having reached the top of the stairs, I paused and listened. Quiet. No sound. However, things were not right. I could feel it. I slipped down the stairs, phone in hand with my thumb hovering over the call button. The shadows seemed to deepen, and sounds seemed louder. My pulse pounded in my ears. I stepped into the kitchen half, expecting to see the thing. Ask someone waiting for me. The kitchen was empty. Just the soft hum of the fridge, and the distant ticking of the clock. I checked the back door locked. Did the windows closed? Everything was in order. Still the feeling in my heart just wouldn't go away. I turned to head back into the hallway, and I nearly screamed. Duke stood at the threshold of the kitchen, staring at me with wide-opened eyes. But not only that, there was something hauntingly different about him. He was too still, too upright. Duke. I whispered no reply. I stepped gingerly towards him, and that's when I saw it, his shadow. It stretched unnaturally long against the floor, reaching toward me like a hand. But the worst part, it wasn't his. I gasped, stumbling back. My foot caught on the rug, and I nearly fell. My breath came in short, panic bursts. I forced myself to look again. The shadow was gone. Duke was still standing there. But now he seemed normal, his ears twitch, his tail flicked slightly. Had I imagined it? I was breathing too fast, my mind spiraling. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was stress. But that text message, the open door, the shadow I needed. Answers. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to my husband's number. My fingers shaking as I typed, "Call me. When you wake up, something weird is going on." I hesitated before hitting send. I didn't want to sound paranoid. But I couldn't ignore this feeling any longer. As I turned off the kitchen light and headed back upstairs, I made a silent promise to myself. Tomorrow I'd find out the truth. Because deep down I already knew something was in this house. And it wasn't just me and Duke. That night I was unable to sleep. Duke's odd behavior, the open door, and the message. My mind was spinning with all of this. Although I hoped that things would return to normal in the morning, the restlessness persisted for a while. Throughout the day, Duke was agitated, particularly in that kitchen corner whisper. I looked away, but I couldn't help but stare. Every time I went by, what was it? Is there something that scared me? I had a gut feeling that I needed to take action. Despite my fear, I went into the kitchen the following night when Duke turned that corner once more. My heart was racing, but I couldn't run any further. Duke was standing right next to the fridge, growling softly. I don't know if his hands were shaking, or if it was just how I felt, but I gathered my courage and pushed the fridge. It was heavy, but it slid slightly to the side. I don't know if it was the cold air from inside, or just my imagination. Then my eye caught the floor. Something small was glowing. I bent down and picked it up. The moment I saw what was in my palm, my blood froze. It was my husband's wedding ring. But that was impossible. He never took off his ring. As I held the ring tightly between my fingers, my mind wandered. How had it gotten here? My breathing quickened. My heart almost jumped out of my C*******T. I felt an icy wind chill me, and just then a shadow moved behind me a moment, and I had forgotten how to breathe. My eyes opened wide and my body could not move. The shadow was reflected in the wall too, and it was now slowly approaching me. I took an unconscious step back. My heart was beating. I wanted to turn around, but something blocked me from inside. Duke let out a low growl, and that didn't even reach me. It was closer. I felt a cold, heavy breath at the back of my neck. A voice was screaming inside my head to get away, and still I did nothing. Frozen. Shaking hands still clutched upon my husband's wedding ring. At that point the light flickered. I blinked once and the shadow was gone. I quickly turned around. There was no one behind me. My throat felt a lump. I looked behind the refrigerator once more. Still, I couldn't see anything else. I said to myself, this is just a coincidence. Maybe my husband dropped his ring by mistake. I whispered, but my brain wouldn't believe the lie, for deep inside of me, I had that feeling which was smothering, and which I couldn't describe. Something wasn't right here, and I was about to find out the truth. My hands trembled as I clutched my husband's wedding ring, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The kitchen felt unbearably cold, but I didn't know if it was the room, or just my fear, spreading through my body like ice. Duke stood rigid, his eyes locked on something behind me. The low guttural growl in his throat sent shivers down my spine. I didn't want to turn around. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but my legs felt like they were made of stone. Then I heard a whisper. It wasn't the kind of whisper you hear in passing conversation, or the soft murmur of the wind through an open window. It was deep, almost guttural, thick, with something unrecognizable. The sound slithered into my ears and wrapped around my thoughts like a vice. My vision blurred for a second as my pulse pounded in my temples. I spun around, but there was nothing there. The kitchen was empty. The dim light from the hallway cast long, eerie shadows, but I saw nothing. And yet I still felt it. Someone or something was here. Then came to the footsteps. Soft on the first. Then consciously they did not come from outside. Not from the road or hallway. They were indoors. Inside my house. Inside my kitchen. I can't breathe. I spontaneously pulled back, pressed against the refrigerator, felt the cold metal against my back. Duke put a sharp bark, her body under stress, her coat BRLYL. He warned me and protected me. But from whom a sudden crack shocked me. My gaze moved towards the entrance to the kitchen. The door was a bit immortal. Do I let it be open? I didn't remember one more step. It was closer. My fingers were dug in my shirt clothes, because I forced myself to think, could it be my husband? Did he come home early? But why wouldn't he have called me? And why should her wedding ring be hidden behind the fridge? No, it wasn't him. Something inside me knew that. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking so violently that I almost dropped it. My screen was still open to the message I had received earlier. Are you going to tell him? My stomach twisted. Was someone watching me? I tapped my husband's number with clumsy fingers, pressing the phone to my ear. It rang once, twice, then hey babe. His voice was calm. General, very normal. Ha. I stuttered, darting around my eyes around the kitchen, trying to focus. You are okay? He asked. No. I was not well. Not even close. Where are you? I whispered. There was a brief stagnation. Then his response sent ice directly through my veins. I'm in the hotel. Why? I harassed the phone. My breath stopped. He was not here. So who was with me at home? I opened my mouth to say something to warn him to scream, but the kitchen light is flicker. The whisper came again, this time close. A shadow went beyond the door. Duke fiercely lunging ahead. I turned and I saw him. Or rather I saw this. And at that moment I felt something terrible. My husband had left, but something else had stayed behind. Duke's sudden bark made me jump from my spot. The sharpness of his voice hit the cold air of the kitchen, making every wall tremble. It was so strong that my heart echoed in my head. Duke leaped around a corner and focused straight for the door. His legs tense, his neck stiffly contracted, but I was just frozen. My eyes wanted to scan everything in the room, but my body was frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't say a word. And the fear inside me tightened and tightened like a stone in my throat. Everything suddenly felt very different. I felt the air getting colder. The normally warm kitchen was suddenly freezing. Everything stopped, time slowed down, and I realized everything. I was no longer alone for a moment. I realized something. It wasn't just fear that was going through me. There was another strange feeling. This feeling was nowhere to be found, but somehow it didn't belong to me. I closed my eyes. I closed my eyes tightly, so as not to hear any sound to calm the wave of fear inside me. But unfortunately doing so did not give me any peace. On the contrary, I felt an emptiness inside me, a feeling that something was watching me. And I suddenly realized that even though my eyes were closed, someone's gaze was piercing through my back. A thick dread formed in the pit of my stomach, heavy like lead. I opened my eyes and the room was deathly dark. The flickering light in the kitchen suggested it may cut off any moment. As my gaze fell again to the darkness surrounding me, I realized something very surprising. Somewhere amid the haze, time came to a screeching halt. There was no barking from Duke, not even a slight creaking of the refrigerator doors. All was silent, but that overwhelming presence was there. In that silence no sounds were present, and yet it was evident that something was there behind me. But what? Duke's barking stopped. It happened so hard and so suddenly that my heart skipped a beat. A voice inside me called out to me, this time in a completely different tone, deep, low and chilling, so close. It was not just one voice inside me. It was inside my room 3. I felt it was barking just behind me when a caress touched my shoulder. Icy, quivering like a hand wishing to vacate my body rather than embrace me. An entirely unsuspected touch. Starkly cold. I could not speak. I was frozen in place. I wanted to scream, yet there was no sound. It was as though something had lodged itself in my throat. My eyes were tightly clean-nosed, again with great difficulty. I wanted to open my eyes, but darkness engulfed me, absorbing me. There was only one thought echoing in my mind. Something is watching me. I'm not here. I have to get out of here. If this story resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us craft more engaging stories for you.